Fewer than 1 in 20 soldiers who attempt Delta Force selection actually make it through. Most of them are already elite. Rangers, Green Berets, experienced infantry NCOs with years of service. And yet, the process still breaks them anyway. You've already spent years earning the right to try. You've spent years building yourself for this, but none of that guarantees you'll survive what happens to you next. This is what it actually takes to become and rise through the ranks of one of the most secretive special operations units in the world.
Stage 1. The applicant. Before you ever set foot on a selection course, you have to earn the right to attempt it. This unit doesn't take walk-ons. You need years of service, an exceptional record, and the recommendation of commanders who've already watched you perform under pressure in a conventional unit. The application process itself filters most people out. You submit records, pass physical and psychological screening, and then you wait, sometimes for months, not knowing if you'll be invited at all. Many capable soldiers never make it past this stage, not because they lack skill, but because the timing, the vacancies, or the paperwork didn't line up in their favor. You learn early that this path has as much to do with persistence as raw ability. When the invitation finally comes, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like the starting line of something you don't yet understand the shape of.
Stage 2. The candidate. You arrive at selection already among the most capable soldiers in the Army. But that actually means nothing here. The first weeks are built to strip away everything you think you know about your own limits. Long-distance land navigation alone, carrying a rucksack loaded far beyond what feels reasonable, over terrain that punishes every wrong decision. No one tells you the time standards. No one tells you how you're doing. No one measures your score in the moment. You navigate in silence, day after day, watching the number of candidates around you quietly shrink. The psychological pressure is the real test here, even more than the physical one. You are constantly uncertain whether you're passing or failing, and the uncertainty itself is the mechanism. The command wants to see who keeps moving forward without reassurance, without knowing if the effort is even working. Most of the men who fail selection don't fail because their bodies gave out. They fail because their mind did, quietly, on some nameless ridge, alone with a rucksack, and no idea if they're already too late. By the end, you've lost track of how many candidates started beside you. What's left is a fraction. Some sources suggest fewer than 1 in 20 who began the process.
Stage 3. Assessment and psychological evaluation. Now, surviving the physical gauntlet isn't the finish line, because when you are done with that, now comes a different kind of scrutiny. Psychological evaluation. Interviews with senior operators and unit psychologists, and a board that decides whether your judgment, your temperament, and your ability to operate under ambiguity actually fit what this unit requires. This stage exists because physical capability alone has never really been the deciding factor. The unit needs people who can make sound decisions with incomplete information, people who can operate independently for extended periods without direct oversight, and people who won't crack under the specific pressure of operations where mistakes carry consequences far beyond a training exercise. You're asked questions designed to reveal how you think, not just only what you know, but how you'd handle uncertainty, how you'd handle failure, how you'd handle watching a plan fall apart in real time. Some candidates who breezed through the physical portion somehow wash out from here. It's a hard lesson in what this unit actually values, and it recalibrates your understanding of what you're trying to become.
Stage 4. Operator Training Course. You made it through selection and assessment. Now the real training begins. And it doesn't get easier, it gets even more demanding in ways selection never tested. This phase builds the actual skill set that is needed. Marksmanship, far beyond standard infantry qualification. Close quarters battle, breaching, defensive and offensive driving, medical training, thorough enough that every operator can function as a combat medic if needed. You train until precision under extreme stress becomes automatic, because in the environments this unit operates in, a half second of hesitation is the difference between a successful operation and a catastrophic one. You also learn the culture here is different from conventional military structure. Rank matters less than competence. You'll be corrected by operators without regard for whether you outrank them, because the unit's survival depends on skill, not hierarchy. And unlearning years of conventional military instinct is its own kind of difficult.
Some candidates who make it this far struggle more with this cultural shift than with any physical demand the course puts on them.
Stage 5. Junior Operator.
You're assigned to an operational troop now, working alongside operators who've spent years perfecting skills you're still developing. You are, by a wide margin, the least experienced person in the room, and everyone knows it, including you. This stage is about earning trust in small, deliberate increments. Elite units run on trust, built through repetition. You rehearse the same operations dozens of times until execution becomes instinct. Because in real operations, there's no time to think through a decision, only time to execute the one you've already trained into muscle memory. You start to understand the actual weight of this work. The operations you train for aren't hypothetical. They're real contingencies with real consequences. And the unit's reputation for near-flawless execution exists because failure in this line of work doesn't just cost the mission, it costs lives, potentially including your own team's. The senior operators around you rarely say this out loud. They don't need to. You feel it in how seriously every rehearsal is treated, no matter how many times you've run the same scenario.
Stage 6. Experienced Operator. Years in now, you've moved past simply keeping pace with the operators around you. You've developed your own specializations, your own skills the team leans on you for specifically, whether that's a technical discipline, a language capability, or a tactical role you've become the go-to for. You've also accumulated something selection and training could never fully prepare you for: the actual experience of operations, the deployments, and the long stretches of uncertainty that come with a career in this world. You understand now that the physical selection process, brutal as it was, tested only a fraction of what this job actually demands. The real test has turned out to be sustained performance over years, across deployments, through the kitten of unglamorous repetition that never makes it into any story about this unit.
You've also lost people. Not everyone who makes it this far stays for a full career, and not every loss is one you're free to discuss, even years later. It changes how you carry the job, quietly, in ways that don't show on the surface. Stage 7. Senior Operator. At this level, you've built the experience and trust that separates a senior operator from everyone still proving themselves. You're now the one training the newest Aradals, passing on the exact lessons that got hammered into you years earlier, often in the same blunt, unsentimental way you originally received them. Your responsibilities expand beyond just execution. You're now involved in planning, in mentorship, in the kind of tactical decision-making that requires the accumulated judgment of years, not just physical capability. The unit depends on operators like you to maintain standards that don't slip, because the margin for error in this work has never gotten any wider, no matter how experienced you become. You've also absorbed something that never fully leaves you. You have the awareness of how many candidates never made it to where you're standing, and how much of your presence here came down to a combination of preparation and circumstances that could have gone differently for you, the same way they did for people you started selection alongside who didn't make it this far.
Stage 8. Master Operator. At the senior enlisted level, you carry the operational and institutional knowledge of the unit itself. Only fewer people reach this point than reach almost any comparable rank in conventional military structure, and this is not because of politics or promotion boards, but only because most who could have gotten here didn't survive selection. They didn't survive the training pipeline. They didn't survive the years of deployments in between, or maybe they simply chose to leave before accumulating what this level requires. Your role now is less about your own execution and more about the operators around you, the training standards, the operational judgment, the unbroken chain of institutional knowledge that keeps a unit like this operating at the level its reputation demands. You've trained candidates who didn't make it, and operators who became some of the most capable soldiers you've ever served with, and you understand, more than almost anyone, exactly how thin the line between those two outcomes actually is.
You think back sometimes to that first ridge, alone with a rucksack, not knowing if you were already too late. You realize now you never actually stopped carrying that uncertainty. You just learned to operate inside it instead of being paralyzed by it. That, more than any single skill, may be the actual thing this entire career selected for. Less than 5% of an already elite pool ever complete the selection program. Only fewer still spend a full career at the peak level you've reached. The odds were never in your favor, at any stage along the way. But you beat them anyway, not through a single moment of heroism, but through refusing to stop moving forward, year after year, stage after stage, on ridges no one was watching, and even when no one told you if it was working or not.